Vince, you have the floor for introduction. Thank you.
All right. Tonight we have Hank Goldenberg, the founder and president of the Camera Club. Tonight he's been speaking on making great pictures with a cell phone. Hank, you're up.
Thanks for having me. Let me get started with the presentation right away. You got that. Good. Okay. What I want to talk about is a lot about photography and what makes pictures good or great, and also focus on smartphones, the advantages, disadvantages, and features. But I want to say a few words about the Shutterbugs first. We started about 3.5 years ago. We have 65 members now, and our goal is to work on improving our skills in photography, with the camera skills, post-processing skills, and I have, over the couple of years, I've seen really good improvement in people's skills. And not that I'm an expert myself, I'm always trying to improve also, but really people enjoy this. We have monthly challenges, and we get a large number of submissions every month. People are very active, and it's a challenge to pick out the good ones. And I publish them in the Canal Walk newsletter. I'm sure you've seen sometimes a centerfold and other things. The people here in Canal Walk are very talented, artistic, creative, and it's great to see the work that they put out. We also have a lot of photo tips. We give photo tips and hands-on workshops. So we have been using, or had been using, the computer room up in the Canal Walk Clubhouse. We'll probably get back to that again someday, but hands-on workshops on photo editing and processing. Now, we've had some big projects also, like the Signs of Spring project, and most recently the pandemic effects on Canal Walk. We had 65 pictures submitted from the Shutterbugs about things that are happening around Canal Walk that are impacted by the COVID pandemic. And some of those pictures have been published in the newsletter. We have an upcoming gallery show in the Freedom Clubhouse. That's the first time the clubhouse has been open in a long time. There'll be a walkthrough by invitation, by reservation. People can come and see the prints that have been put up there. And we also have photo trips. I just want to show you some results of some of our photo trips. We haven't had one in a while, but here's an example of a trip we did to the steel stacks. I don't know if you know about steel stacks. It's in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It's an old steel mill that's been closed down. We took a trip out there last year. Got a lot of great pictures there. You know, one of my favorite topics is peeling paint and rust. And I got lots of great pictures on that trip. We have done several trips to Longwood Gardens. Here's an example of one that I did a little bit of extra work on. People very much enjoyed that one. And we went to the around, but again, a lot of great pictures there. And we also have gone to New York, Manhattan, to see the annual Photo Plus trade show, see the equipment, and you could take pictures of models, and that was a lot of fun, that trip. So if you want to join the Shutterbugs, if you want to really work on improving your photography, if you want to see great pictures, meet a great bunch of people, the contact information is in the newsletter. I'd love to have more people there. It's a lot of fun. So now let me get started. I want to start with a pop quiz. So normally, if this was in the ballroom, then you could, shout out your answers. In this case, I think you could just sort of mentally think of the answer to these questions. This has to do with photographs and what's good or bad about them. I just want to get you warmed up. So I look at a picture and I say, can anything be improved here? I know the Shutterbugs are probably giggling right now because they've seen this many, many times. But I'll have to give you the answer. The answer is, one of the things is that the horizon is way, way off on this picture. I call them wonky horizon. And why is that important, right? Because this really is disorienting when you look at this. Now, my point is about this one is, what's the cause of this? This has nothing to do with the camera. There's nothing to do with the settings on the camera. This has everything to do with the photographer. The photographer here didn't take the time to look at the picture carefully before snapping the shutter. So the horizon is wonky. It turns out that this could be fixed in post-processing, but really it's a rescue operation. It shouldn't happen. The other thing you might notice is that at one end of this really nice sailboat is really close to the edge here. And what happens when you put a frame on this picture is it's going to cover up part of that sailboat. So this has all to do with composition. Here's another example. How would you improve this picture? Well, this is my lovely wife, Leslie, and she has a lamppost sticking out of her shoulder. Okay, bad composition. It would only take a few feet, move yourself over a couple of feet and clear this up. This is really hard to fix in post-processing. It has nothing to do with the camera settings. Again, it's all the photographer and what they see and when they snap the shutter, where the position is, what they're looking at in the background of the picture. Okay, so what's going on here? The faces of these people are way too dark. And why is that? That's because the background is so bright, really, really bright, and it fools the camera. It's not the camera's fault. The camera tries to average the lighting, so a bright background means the camera shuts down the aperture, tries to darken the picture, and it darkens the things that you really want to see. So what you do here is you need to find a good background for a picture, or you try and set the exposure for the faces and not the background. And you can do that with the camera settings. You can do that with a smartphone. The other thing I really don't like about this picture is this this thing here, which is a piece of a frame of a window. It's very distracting. Otherwise, it'd be a beautiful, balanced picture. I hope you're getting all the right answers here. Anything wrong with this picture? Well, yeah, it's really out of focus. And the problem with this picture is I should have thrown it away right after I took it. The camera was probably too close, could not focus, and I didn't look at the result before I went on to the next picture. So there's a problem. Again, it's not the camera's problem. Okay, how would you do to improve this picture? Well, there's nothing really wrong with this picture except it's kind of boring. It's really boring. It has nice colors, it's good in focus. So, but keep this one in mind because I have this something to use this picture in another composition. And sometimes I do that. I collect textures, I collect pictures of rust and peeling paint and clouds and lots of things. So this one is, we're going to save this one for later, but you know, it's just kind of boring picture by itself. So what would you improve here? It's a beautiful flower, right? A bird of paradise, a beautiful, beautiful flower. Your eye normally, when you're looking at this picture, is drawn to the brightest spots in the picture, right? The brightest areas. Well, look where the brightest areas are. It's off to the side here. It's up in the corner, up here. It's down here. It's everything but where the flower is. This is a terrible background for such a beautiful picture, beautiful, beautiful flower. So when you see something like this flower, make sure you have a nice background. Even though the background is blurred here, which helps, it's way too bright. And again, this has nothing to do with the camera. It's all the photographer. So a couple of bottom lines come out of this. First of all, there's two people involved in evaluating a picture. There's the photographer and the viewer, and they don't always agree. I can't tell you how many times I've taken a picture and I've shown it to my wife because I think it's a great, great picture. And she goes, meh, you know. Then the other way around. Sometimes there's a picture sitting on my screen from, you know, a bunch of like contact prints kind of things. And she'll say, oh, I love that one. And I wasn't really thrilled about it. So really, it depends on the point of view here. When you're a photographer, you're trying to take a good picture, you know, make it good for yourself. A lot of us these days look at our photographs on social media, especially on smartphones and tablets. And the standards for small screens are a lot different because you can't see the detail. And sometimes you can't see the focus as well on a picture as you can on a big screen or a big print. So if you're going to shoot purely for social media, you have a lot less to worry about. The key question to ask is, you take a picture, would you enlarge it, print it, and hang it in a prominent place in your home, like by your front door as people walk in? If it passes that test, you probably have a really good picture, a really good print. Thing about photographs is the good ones will stir some kind of an emotion when someone sees the picture. It could be, you know, joy, happiness, surprise, fear. It could be disappointed. Usually something happens, and it happens a lot. Similar to paintings and drawings and sculpture. I mean, if it's a really good picture, it'll cause some kind of an emotional reaction. That's usually a good thing. That's, you've got your point across. Or it could capture a rare moment, something that only happens very rarely, or a unique point of view, like I shoot flowers from the ground up sometimes instead of from the top down. And it's amazing how interesting they look with the sky as a background instead of the ground as a background. But that really helps to make a unique picture. Most good and great pictures are technically well executed, so they're in focus. They have good composition, the exposure is done well, the color balance is done well. These are things that you learn over time. And some of these things we teach and we practice in the Shutterbugs. The technical parts of it, the skill, the camera skill, and things like that. Important thing is that you don't need post-processing to produce a good photograph. It's not required. If you have a bad photograph, post-processing may not be able to help. All right, so you work from the camera. So my best advice is work from the camera, work from your own vision of what you want. And the important thing is that it doesn't matter what camera you're using, all these principles will apply. Time for another pop quiz. I'm going to talk about the history of smartphone cameras a little bit. So here's a question for you. When was the first handheld mobile phone demonstrated? And I don't mean the AMPS phone with the big suitcase that was in the trunk of your car. That's a mobile phone, but it wasn't a handheld mobile phone. You got the answer? It was 1973 by two gentlemen from Motorola. And here you can see a picture of it. It looks a little bit like a cordless phone. No display, just a keypad, little antenna coming out the top. 1973. Which was the first cell phone to have a camera? It's not the iPhone. Kyocera in 1999 in Japan came out with a camera on a cell phone. It had 0.1 megapixels. When was the first cell phone with a camera available in the US? It's not the Kyocera model, not the iPhone. The Sprint had an introduction of the Sanyo model in November 2002. It was 0.3 megapixels. I'll come back to megapixels later. And then the question you've all been waiting for is, when did Apple introduce its first smartphone camera? 2007, the original Apple iPhone had 2 megapixels. And notice that it was 5 years before Apple came out with that smartphone camera. 5 years. The smartphone cameras, I mean, totally revolutionized consumer photography space. Before that, there was a point and shoot. I'm sure you've all had a point and shoot camera. Basically, it could fit in your pocket, a little bit bulky, but it would fit in your pocket. It was very convenient. Smartphone camera came along, it totally changed everything because you carry it everywhere, right? There are trillions and trillions of pictures taken now annually. Snapshots, pictures, photographs, documentation of things using smartphones. And by far the most convenient camera, right? Although today some of these phones are getting pretty large to fit in your pocket. I see a lot of people now with their smartphone in a holster or carrying it somehow, but it really is hard to fit it in your pocket anymore because they're so large. The components of a camera, just the camera parts, cost between $50 and $75. So you don't get a whole lot as far as cameras go with the camera in a smartphone, but the manufacturers have done a pretty amazing job optimizing the hardware that's in the phones, and especially the software. And that's the big advantage I see with the smartphone cameras is the software that goes along with the hardware. And it's still an arms race between the vendors, but I'll let you know that all the vendors all have the cameras that capture excellent images in good conditions. It really doesn't matter. They're all very, very good cameras. The difference between vendors is more about the software now than it is about the hardware. And don't automatically assume that Apple smartphones have the best cameras. You have to do, if you really want to check into the specs, you can, and you'll find out that there's various vendors that have advantages over Apple, and Apple has advantages over other ones. It depends on what you want to do with your smartphone camera. And beware of what I call telephoto bragging. iPhone 11 Pro has a 52 millimeter focal length, what they call a telephoto. In actuality, 52 millimeters is just a normal lens in SLR cameras. 52 millimeters normal. Telephoto is maybe 200 millimeters. And there's no way they could fit such a big telephoto into a smartphone. So they have to compensate somewhat with software. The smartphone cameras don't really have optical zoom like you get with a handheld a dedicated camera with a lens on the front where you can zoom in and zoom out. Optical zoom is really great. It doesn't degrade the image at all, as opposed to digital zoom, which does degrade the image. Although the software is getting better and better with the digital zoom, it still is going to have to generate pixels, and that will degrade. And there are accessories like you can add a telephoto lens to a smartphone, and you can have a bag full of accessories if you want to carry that around, but then, you know, you're losing the convenience that you have with the thing that's in your pocket, a smartphone. And here's some examples of some accessories. If you're serious about taking good pictures in low light conditions, or you want to do timed shutter, you know, long shutter release, the camera has to be perfectly still. There's no way around it. So there are tripod systems made up for smartphones. There are adapters that can adapt the smartphone to a regular photographic tripod. And there are a bunch of manufacturers that make clip-on adapters that fit over the camera. And you could do wide angle, you could do macro, telephoto, fisheye, all the popular things. But again, you're carrying a bag full of parts when you do that. Still, these are a whole lot smaller than the regular lenses that you might have on a SLR. Now, if you really want to go after accessories, then you do something like this. So this is a telescope that I would say here is a telescope that has a smartphone as an accessory. An example at 80 times, this is really a telescope basically. And it's good for taking pictures of stars and things like that, or your neighbor's, window, things like that. Here's some photos. I just want to show you some of the pictures really come out quite well with this is with a Galaxy S7, which is a couple of years old now. There's great detail. The focus is sharp. Colors look good. It's a little bit blown out in the flowers, which is something I would have corrected in post-processing. But this is right out of the camera, basically. Very little cropping and editing work done on this picture. Also, it's surprising you can get very close with smartphones. There's raindrops on a piece of canvas. You can see the detail here. Basically, no post-processing, no zooming or cropping done, just out of the camera. And this one, interesting one, it shows what's called differential focus. So the smartphone is actually focusing on the image that's in the mirror here. There's a mirror on my bike, while the background is blurred, which is nice because it has a contrast with the main image. What's interesting is that the frame of the mirror itself, the frame is actually not in focus, but it's the same distance as the mirror, and yet the image in the mirror is in focus. It's an interesting thing about mirrors, but of course the image itself is really way far away, and that's what the camera focused on. So really, smartphones are really good at a wide variety of things, and good lighting work really well. Now I want to talk a little technical stuff for a minute, and here's a good chance if you want to take a potty break, if you don't like technical stuff, you want to get a cup of coffee. I just have one slide on pixels and megapixels because it's important, because the vendors here are pushing for more and more pixels, and they think that's important, or consumers think that's important. It turns out it's really not so important, especially these days with the size of the sensors that they have in the smartphones. So we look at this in two ways now. A pixel is the smallest element of a digital image. So all the images that you see today, the digital images, are all composed of dots of color and light. Each one of those is a pixel. It's stored in a computer file. There's a number associated with each pixel that's stored in a computer file. So you can't actually see the image in the file. You have to develop the image. You have to take the numbers and translate them into colors and put them in the right spot on the screen. And that's what the software in your computer does. It actually displays the file. So when you copy a picture, you're actually copying a file. Anyway, megapixels is the more of them you have in a picture, the more detail that you're going to have in the final image. So in the cameras are composed of pixels in the sensor. I'm going to give you some examples of the size of the sensors. A high-end Nikon, an 850 Nikon, which is a recent model released by Nikon, has 46 million pixels. Megapixels, a million pixels. The Canon 5D, which is similar on the Canon side, is 30 megapixels, still substantial. The iPhone 11 Pro has 12 megapixels, and you say, well, that's not a whole lot compared to the other cameras, but it turns out that 12 megapixels is a really good number. The Samsung S20 Pro Ultra has 108 megapixels, but by far blows everything away. Except that they've done a trick. They've cheated. In the Samsung camera, they group the pixels together 9 at a time, 9 of them at a time. So actually, you're only getting 12 megapixels. but they can claim 108 because they divided each pixel into 9 parts. So just be careful with that. By the way, that phone is $1,400. So when you're talking about smartphones, like I said before, there's no optical zoom. So if you really want to take a picture that's of an image that's far away, there's problems. The best you can do is with digital zoom, which is where the software is filling in pixels for you as it blows up the image. And digital zoom works best if you have more pixels, obviously. More pixels, you'll get more detail, and when you blow it up, you still have a decent picture. But the software is still getting better, and they're able to develop algorithms that fill in the pixels a lot better than they used to. So that's something that really helps. Now, on the other hand, on the display side, what the viewer sees is not what the camera sees. The displays, like on your smartphone, the display on your television, in a print, they have pixels, but those pixels are the output side of things, not the sensor side. So display, like if you wanted to print an image, 11 by 14 print, takes 9 megapixels, 9 million pixels, right? But all of these cameras easily meet the 9 megapixels. So you can easily do an 11 by 14 print with an iPhone, any of the other cameras, and most smartphones will easily do an 11 by 14 print with really good quality. If you have a 4K ultra high definition TV in your house, it's the latest version of technology, that screen has 8 megapixels in it. That's comparable to 11 by 14 inch print, obviously much bigger, so the pixels are much bigger, but there's 8 million of them. Still, the iPhone, for example, has plenty of megapixels for that. Your regular HD TV monitor only needs 2 megapixels. 2 megapixels. No matter how big it is, whether it's 40 inch, 80 inch, 2 megapixels. A computer monitor, like you're viewing now, maybe, is 2 megapixels. And here's the kicker. The iPhone display is 1.5 megapixels. The whole screen on your iPhone, 1.5 million pixels. So here you have a camera that does 12 megapixels. And if all you're doing is looking at pictures on it, on the phone, you have way more pixels than you could possibly need, right? Almost 10 times. But if you start cropping, cropping means you're taking out pieces of the border to maybe zoom in on a piece of the picture, you're going to lose pixels. You're going to delete around the border. And what happens? Okay, the number of pixels gets smaller as you crop. So it started out as 12 megapixels and you crop it, let's say in half, you might only have 4 megapixels left. But even with that, it's still plenty for that kind of a display. But then if you want to go on a printing, now you have a problem because your 4 megapixel picture doesn't have enough to fit on a print nicely. So I think 12 is a good number, as long as you don't do a lot of cropping, or if you stick with social media for the most part, 12 megapixels is fine. The regular Samsung line like the S10 has 12 megapixels also, okay? And that's it for the technical stuff. Here's what the cameras look like. It's very interesting. The 3 major brands, the Apple iPhone, the Google Pixel, and the Samsung S20, this is the Ultra model, have multiple cameras because they don't have interchangeable lenses. They have 3 cameras here. There's 2 cameras here. There's 3 or 4 cameras on this one. Then there's a flash unit. And I think this other thing here is a microphone. Anyway, look at that, 3 different, they call it wide angle, normal, and telephoto. Whatever they call it, there's 3 lenses, there's 3 apertures, there's 3 sensors. And so that's how you pay for your hardware. They all generate very good pictures, any one of them. Let me talk about how you use your camera, smartphone camera. All the techniques I talked about before, composition, exposure, color balance, watch your background, watch for distractions, they all apply to smartphone cameras and how you use it. If you're shooting for social media, just go all automatic and just have fun. Just take shots, snapshots, very easy to do. The camera does a really good job. If you have strong lighting, like outdoors, at the beach, in your backyard, with the automatic settings on a smartphone camera, you're going to get good results with most scenes. It'll be in focus, have good exposure, good color balance. With weak lighting, though, you have to be careful. The sensors are not that sensitive in a smartphone, and the shutter speed will slow down in low light. You may have motion blur because the camera is going to move a little bit. Remember, you're holding it out at arm's length now. You're not holding it up to your face. So the camera's going to move, and also the camera's going to try and amplify the image, and when it amplifies the image, it's going to get noisy. So those are some limitations that you have in low light situations. Some cameras now, smartphone cameras, can take multiple pictures and combine the pictures together to overcome that. So again, they're using the software to help overcome the hardware issue. And be careful with digital zoom. If you use up to 4x on digital zoom, it usually comes out pretty good. You usually get a good image. You go beyond that, and some cameras claim up to 100 digital zoom. Make sure you look at the image when it's done, because you may find that it's kind of rough around the edges, noisy, not exactly what you like. So just be careful with digital zoom. And read the user manual. And why do I say ha? Well, you find the user manual. Try and find the user manual. It's tough. What I recommend is go online and get to the tutorials. There's a million tutorials on smartphone cameras and how to use them. Shooting techniques, settings, how to use the software. You go through the manual if you can find it, but I find the tutorials work a whole lot better. And of course, join the Shutterbugs, because we do have classes and workshops on smartphones. Now the features, in a smartphone camera, a lot of it is done automatically. So the exposure measurement, the calculation of focus, the color balance, the camera does all the calculations and it does all the settings for you. So it makes it very, very easy. And usually it's pretty good at that. And there are some specific modes and scenes which I recommend you play around with. One of them is the portrait. Most smartphone cameras have a portrait setting. What that does is it tries to find the face in the frame. It focuses on the face. And because the camera has a wide aperture, it's going to blur the background. Sort of an optical effect that happens. It happens in all cameras. But by focusing on the face, you get a blurred background. And then the face, the portrait, pops out from the background. It makes a very, very engaging portrait. So use the portrait mode, try it out, and you'll see what I mean. Also, I recommend the panorama setting. So here, normally I would say don't move the camera when you're taking a picture. That's really bad. In this case, though, the camera takes a bunch of pictures with a very short shutter speed. And so it basically freezes each picture, and you're moving the camera, sweeping it across a bunch of pictures, and it automatically combines all the images together into one big long panorama. And you can do this horizontally or vertically. And it sometimes comes out really great. The one thing that doesn't come out great is if you have things that are moving in the scene, like someone running in front of the camera. You can imagine in one snapshot, the person is in one place, and in the next snapshot, the person is in a different place. The software has to figure out what to do about that, and sometimes it messes it up pretty badly. So panoramas work really good when the scene is kind of fixed, right? Also, I recommend this thing called HDR. You'll probably see it on your camera, wondering what it is. High dynamic range. What it means is that it's useful in a scene when there's very, very bright part in the picture and a very dim part in the picture. And the camera cannot handle the difference in the range of brightness, right? So it exposes for one or the other, and you're going to lose one end or the other when you do this. With HDR, the camera takes multiple pictures, and it specifically takes a picture of the bright area and a different picture of the dim area, and then it combines them in the software. So you get a reasonable picture in a situation where normally you could not get both a bright spot and a dark spot at the same time. This works for all kinds of cameras, but in smartphones, it's pretty much automatic. It's done in the camera. And SLRs, some of them these days are starting to do high dynamic range built in, but a lot of times photographers like to do that in post-processing because they have a lot of control over what happens with each individual frame. There's a type of composition on a smartphone called square composition, and you could play with that. You can play with the wide composition also. And you'll see for some types of pictures, possibly portraits, the square works really nice. Things like a flower that's centered in the middle of the frame, you get a square picture, looks really nice. And one thing I recommend for your smartphone is turn on the grid. And here you can see there's a grid that shows up as you're framing, and it does two things. One, it lets you set the point of interest at what's called the rule of thirds, which is at one of these intersections, but also lets you level the horizon, right? Because now you can see where the level point is. So to fix that sailboat picture, if you had the grid turned on, you could say, oh, just level the horizon and then snap the picture. Most of these cameras have what's called the burst mode. If you hold down the shutter, it'll start taking pictures like crazy. It'll take 10 or 15 per second. And it's good when you have like a grandkid's birthday party and a lot of action things going on. It's good if you want to take a portrait of a group of people and it's hard to get everyone with their eyes open. So you take a burst. But just remember now you've got 15 or 20 pictures that you may have to look through and find the one where everyone has their eyes open. This can generate a lot of files, So just use it with care. And you could choose to pick the lens. So as I showed before, you have wide angle, you have normal, you have telephoto. Use the different cameras and lenses to match the situation in the picture. These smartphones tend to have lots of different filters and textures and effects in them to change the appearance of your picture. It's sort of like post-processing, but sometimes you could see it in real time. You could set up a filter and actually see what it's going to look like before you snap the shutter. So I recommend that you try some of these out. You get some amazing effects. You can also download lots of apps that have filters and textures, and then you can enable them and try them out. Another great thing about the smartphones is it's super easy to share your photographs with others. So basically, once you have the picture taken, if you hit you tap on that picture in your gallery and it brings up a sharing icon, you could just email it or message it over to somebody or save it to your cloud. It's very, very easy to do. It's a little bit harder to do that kind of a thing with an SLR. So the smartphone cameras are really tuned up for the internet. That's what they're good at. So I just want to show you something about the smartphones is the smartphone will try and find a focal point, a place to focus. You may not want to focus over there. In this picture of a flower, I don't want to focus where the square is. I want to focus in the middle here. And actually maybe want the outside of this to be a little blurred. So all you have to do is you just touch the display at that point, and the square will jump over to that point, and that's where the focus is going to be. And then you hit the shutter button, and you'll get that in focus. They're really easy to do. Now, there's something about smartphones. It's called advanced camera control. That is, you go off automatic. You really want to do more control. You get more sophisticated. You want to try some things out. You learned a little bit more about photography. And so you want to control the camera better. So if you're serious about controlling the camera, you can use these so-called pro or professional apps that you can download. And here's a table of some of them. like for Android and the Apple and the Google Pixel. If you go to the store, your app store on your phone, and just search for camera control apps, you'll find dozens and dozens of these. A lot of them are free. Some of them you have to pay a small fee on. These are what I consider the better ones, but certainly there are new ones coming out all the time. So you just have to do little homework. Now, some smartphones have a pro mode built in. Like my Galaxy has a pro mode, you could find it, and that'll turn on a lot of sort of manual controls. Things you can do manually to override what the camera's doing, like the exposure, like the shutter speed, things like that. And that does come in handy sometimes if you're serious about getting a certain picture and the camera is not doing what you want it to do, then you have to override the automatic features. So you go to pro mode. And that takes some practice and some study. It's not obvious from the phone itself how these things work. And then on top of that, there are some editing applications where you can change the picture, after you've taken the picture. Some of these apps also include camera control. So you can do both. You can take the control of the camera and you can do post-processing. I'm not going to go into that area. So as I said before, it's important. If you're serious about this, get online, look up tutorials about your camera, about your smartphone, especially iPhone. There's a kind of photography called iPhoneography. You'll find tons of stuff on that alone. And I do want to talk about post-processing. That is an important part of the photography process. The in-phone editing apps, like what I talked about before, they're really good for global adjustments. Things that you do on the entire picture, like cropping, exposure change. If you want to change exposure, if the picture is too bright or too dim, you want to adjust it after you've taken the picture, you can change exposure. You can rebalance the color. If the color doesn't look, if the skin tones don't look right to you, you can modify the color balance of the picture to look better. And of course, like I said before, you can do lots of special effects in post-processing. You play around with that, have lots of fun with that. Some in-phone apps, the applications to try Snapseed is very popular. VSCO, Adobe has, and then you have the specific ones that are built into your camera, your phone, like iPhoto, and Google has a photo app for editing. They're very basic, but they're right there in the phone. You can use those too. Here's an example of Snapseed. I took this off the internet. I didn't take this myself, but see the difference here. Picture was taken and the shadows are really muddy. Color's not too vibrant. And probably with just a few simple adjustments in Snapseed, right on the phone. This was done right on the phone and saved right to the phone. Came out a pretty nice picture. Good color. Brought out the shadows here nicely. The sky looks nice. Color's good. Very easy to do. Shutterbugs had one workshop. We had Doug Miller did a talk on Snapseed. We all learned how to use the app on the phone. It does work on iPhone and Android as an example. And I'll talk a little bit about Photoshop too. So this is really after you've snapped the picture, you've seen that there's something you want to do with it, and it's maybe not a simple rescue operation. So Photoshop does both global and local adjustments, meaning little things in the picture that you don't like, you can get rid of. You can change smaller things, areas of the picture. And because it uses the computer processors that are built into your laptop or your desktop, those processors are much more powerful than what's in your smartphone, much more powerful. So there's amazing things that could be done with the sophisticated apps like Photoshop. But you have to buy the software, install it. Some of the systems have a buy once and install it. Some of them are subscription based, so you pay monthly or annually for it. But then they upgrade it for you and they offer bug fixes and support. For these apps, you really need training and you need a lot of practice. They are very sophisticated. And we have been giving hands-on workshops in the computer room, as I said before, on the basic Photoshop application. And we have some videos. One of our members, Jay Wald, has put together a series of videos on software called On One Raw, On One Photo, which does similar things, which is a different platform. So here's an example of a picture. I started out with this picture, and I really liked it, but I don't know if you can make it out here, but there's a whole bunch of power lines running through here. They run through out to the back here. This picture is really muddy. The contrast is poor. The lighting was not that good, but I love the, subject here. So I took this into Photoshop and I created this. Now, some people might say this is over-processed. I happen to like it the way it is, but you can see the difference now. First of all, there's no power lines in there, but I brought out a lot of the color and contrast and the dynamic range in the clouds. This is with Photoshop. Now remember that boring picture of the autumn leaves. This is an example of layering in Photoshop. So that picture of the leaves is the background of this picture of a silhouette of a tree with clouds. And I've taken that image and I've made the tree transparent. So where you would see a silhouette black, the silhouette of the tree is now like a window. And now all you see is the leaves behind it. And then the clouds are sort of translucent, so there's a little bit of transmission going on there. To me, this has a little bit of a three-dimensional look to it. That's why I collect textures. I could do stuff like this. And then finally, my panorama. This is a panorama of Manhattan. It's composed of 5 images stitched together. Started out as a long, thin panorama of the Manhattan skyline. And you can even see the Hudson River is right here. See Hudson River? And Photoshop helped me transform this image into this, I don't know what you call it, a sphere. City sphere, I call it. But Photoshop manipulates pixels like crazy. It just does some stuff that you just can't imagine. It's almost unlimited in capabilities. So if you want to play around with that, you can use your smartphone, get the images to start out, and go into post-processing either on the smartphone or take the file off the smartphone onto your laptop or your computer or your tablet, and then do some post-processing on it and get really creative. So the last thing I want to say is take snapshots, but make photographs. What do I mean by that? It takes a lot of work and a sense of purpose to make good photographs. You have to think about it. You have to plan for it. You have to make sure the camera is set. On the other hand, snapshots are usually, spur of the moment. You can get good snapshots, but you may have to take an awful lot of them to get good ones. So decide what you want to do. And, I do both. Depends on the situation. A lot of times when you're traveling, when you get to travel again, there are times when you need to take a snapshot. And there are times when you can contemplate a scene, a beautiful landscape, a sundown, a sunrise. You say, gee, I really want to make this a good shot. Think about the level on the horizon, think about composition, and make a good photograph out of it. That's it. Thank you very much. Questions?
Just want to say what a terrific job you did. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to open the floor to any questions that you have for Hank. I thought his presentation was
That's in
great.
here. Yeah, someone, it's from Jay Wall. The TV and computer monitors have the same number of pixels each, no matter how big the screen. It's sort of true, but computer monitors have different aspect ratios. Some computer monitors are very wide, and some of them are more squarish. So number of pixels may vary a little bit, but for the most part, about 2 megapixels for a regular HD TV and a computer monitor is about what you get. But like I said before, a 40-inch TV, HD TV, and an 80-inch HD TV have the same number of pixels. You're not getting any more detail when you get an 80-inch TV. It's just the pixels are bigger. How can we join the Shutterbugs Club? Oh, how often do we meet? Oh, we meet once a month, and it's the third Monday of the month at 7 o'clock. And now we're doing it by Zoom, sort of like this. We had been meeting in the ballroom. And how do you join? If you go to the newsletter, just go to the Shutterbugs article, and at the end of the article is a contact. Debbie Stewart is our membership person. Her email is in there. We charge $10 fee per year, which helps us defray the cost of our exhibits and other things that we do.
And Hank, if I can add, you don't have to start off being a great photographer. Some of the people in the group are absolutely spectacular photographers, semi-professional and professional, and they are so open to share their knowledge and help you take your pictures and turn them into good photographs.
True, true. And then we have what I call beginners. They just have a smartphone and don't know how to use it, but would like to do better. And you know, we group them together and teach and practice together.
Hank, do you do bar mitzvahs and weddings?
No, I don't. But there are people in the Shutterbugs, I believe, that do.
Jeff, are you
By the way, I
planning
would
about
never,
it?
ever do a wedding. Never, ever. There's too much at stake. Actually, weddings are the hardest. You know why the wedding is really hard? Because usually the hall where the reception is, it's kind of dark, and there's a lot of movement going on. That makes it very hard to take good images under those circumstances. And you're under pressure. It's got to be done. It's got to be done right.
So true.
Hank?
Yep.
Yeah. So what about turning, we take so many pictures throughout the year on trips and everything. How do you turn it into an album that's meaningful? How does one do that?
Well, if you, there's a couple of ways to do an album. You could do an online album. An online album is really easy. The hard part in doing this is culling out the bad pictures and selecting the few good ones. So for example, when I go on a photo trip, I've done some workshops, travel workshops in photography. I've taken, say, 1,000 pictures,
Sure.
1,000. And out of the 1,000, I might choose, say, 20 that I like. Most of them I don't like. But I take them from material and, going back and looking at them again and again and again. So the really hard part is pick the small set. Don't dump 500 pictures on somebody and expect them to go through your 500 pictures. You have to cull out the bad ones, pick the really good ones. You can put that into an album online. There are many apps that Google Photos, for example, is one that you could do directly from your smartphone. You could put photos into an album and you could share the album with people. You send them an email, they click on a link, and there's your album on their smartphone or on their tablet or on their computer. So online albums are really, really easy to do. A little bit harder is a real photo album. And I've done a couple of those where you send your files to a service like Costco. And I've done some really beautiful photo albums. So you take your best pictures, you email them or you send them over to Costco on their website. You order, and you can design it online. You can design which picture goes on which page. You can put text on there. You build an album with a cover, words, text, whatever you want. And then a week later, it shows up in the mail. It's a book, a photo book.
Questions? No. Hank, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
You're
I think you
welcome.
did a great job.
Thank you.
And I look forward to going to the Freedom Clubhouse and get to see all of the pictures on display.
Thank you.
I want to thank you all for attending tonight, and hopefully we will see you on the 12th of October for our next meeting. And please be healthy, safe, and enjoy the upcoming holidays.